Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, it's turning into football's biggest rivalry, but will the title race be over if Liverpool see off Manchester City this afternoon? It wasn't a good evening for Unai Emery. Goals from Jamie Vardy and James Maddison sent Leicester up to second in the Premier League, and his VAR really worth the wait. It took nearly 4 minutes at Tottenham yesterday before David McGoldrick's effort was finally ruled out. Decision made this morning. Jonathan Liew is a sports writer at The Guardian. Rob Draper is chief football writer at The Mail on Sunday, and Henry Winter is the chief football writer with The Times. Morning to you all. Thanks very much for joining us. Big day ahead. Liverpool against Manchester City, of course, at Anfield this afternoon. Don't forget you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at the papers then, dominated by the big game at Anfield this afternoon. The message from the Etihad, it's loud and clear. Write us off at your peril. That's Pep Guardiola's message to Liverpool ahead of that game this afternoon. Raheem Sterling, he says, we're out to get you. The former Liverpool player in action for City this afternoon. But Liverpool, they're not having any of it. The Sunday Mirror this morning, no fear. Virgil van Dijk tells the champions, we're ready, we're waiting. They show no fear. Liverpool playing City this afternoon. The goals pull out in the sun this morning. Lamps champing at the bit. A routine win, good win for them. It's 6 in a row for Chelsea now. They beat Crystal Palace yesterday at the Bridge. Tammy Abraham on the score sheet along with Christian Pulisic. Big trouble for West Ham. Lost 3-0 at Burnley yesterday. Is Manuel Pellegrini in trouble? The goalkeeper Roberto certainly is. Big mistake from him at Turf Moor yesterday. We'll talk about Pellegrini and his future later on in the programme. As we will with this, it's hard to take. Chris Wilder, the Sheffield United manager, he wants big changes to VAR, and so does Mauricio Pochettino. We'll talk about VAR later on in the programme, as we will in part 2 today. Leicester, big win for them against Arsenal. You sensed it was coming, and it did come. Rob was there yesterday to watch Leicester City beat Arsenal, trampled all over them in the last 20 minutes or so of that game at the King Power. We'll get on to that a little bit later, but let's talk about Liverpool and Manchester City. Let's kick off there, if we may, John. And the rivalry between these two clubs, is it because of the success of the two teams, the demands, the history between the two managers? Of course, we can go back to Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp in Germany with Bayern Munich, of course, and Borussia Dortmund. But we're sensing something special developing here now. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's really kind of built up and it's been burning for the last sort of few years. It's a very modern rivalry. And I suppose, you know, it's almost a clash of different ideas. I mean, Liverpool fans claim that City sort of buy their way to success, you know, overlooking the fact that they've spent quite lavishly themselves, whereas City fans are, you know, pretty peeved at the amount of credit that they think Liverpool get in the media. It's very much, it's turned quite bloody, you know. It's turned quite nasty. There've been sort of clashes on the pitch, there are clashes off the pitch, you know, the off-field kind of media operations of, you know, kind of briefing against each other quite furiously. It's really bubbled over. Yeah, it has. Does it feel, we've seen some great rivals in the past, Rob. Arsenal, Manchester United, of course, would be the very, very obvious one at the peak of Arsene Wenger's powers, taking on Sir Alex Ferguson's team at United. Do we sense that this is the same, that this has got the same quality, the same ferociousness? Absolutely, and I think it's the quality of the sides that make the rivalry. I mean, these are two of the best sides in the world at the moment. We haven't had that in the Premier League probably since the Arsenal United in the early 2000s. Maybe when Mourinho's Chelsea and Fergie were going head-to-head as well, that you had two really super sides. And then there's a hiatus in Premier League history, really, where we didn't have the great sides in Europe for the last 10 years. But now you've got two of the best sides. And I think out of that spills the rivalry, because, of course, Wenger and Ferguson famously, as they matured, sort of warmed to each other. But when you're going toe-to-toe, I think it's impossible not to see conspiracies in every little corner. And I was trying to think, we're writing about this week, Forest Liverpool in the late 70s, early 80s, you had two brilliant sides in Europe, and say that United, Arsenal won. It's a very special period. It's only been, in my lifetime, it's only been 2 or 3 times when I think you've had two of the best sides in the world going head-to-head in the Premier League, and I think that's what you've got at the moment.
I think it takes time to build up the ferocity of rivalry. I think we need to give this sort of 2-3 more years. You can't compare it with that intensity between Ferguson and Wenger in the Invincibles era, with pizzas flying around. You go back before that with some of the rucks and the fights on the pitch as well. That was really incredibly intense. and that was ferocious. Some of the comments that were made. I mean, there was a little bit of a nibble earlier in the week over whether Sadio Mane was a diver, and then Pep Guardiola seemed to sort of rein in slightly on that.
Why did he rein?
In terms of toxic build-ups, it lacks the ferocity of before. But I mean, Rob is completely right. We're incredibly fortunate to be watching these two amazing teams with two of the best managers in the world, with the quality of football that we're going to see. And I actually think there's a fair bit of respect between the two sides, which I think with some of the great rivalries of the past, certainly that Wenger-Ferguson era, there wasn't a lot of respect between those two then.
Why did he rein it in? You mentioned Sadio Mane. He was asked. Pep was asked last. It was last Saturday, wasn't he? He was asked about Sadio Mane, and he had been booked that day at Aston Villa for simulation. Why did Guardiola rein it in the week?
Well, maybe he had a word. Maybe he felt that what he said and the leap to the headlines wasn't exactly how he wanted it to be, although I think he was pretty fairly quoted. Maybe he realised that it was a mistake. I mean, if you look at Fernandinho is the master of the sort of disrupting flow as well. So City aren't exactly immune to the dark arts themselves. And maybe Guardiola just wanted to actually focus on the quality of the football. I mean, I'm going up there afterwards, and you know that it will be a tight game, but just the celebration of the footballing talents. I hope VAR doesn't get involved. I hope it's not a refereeing story, but just the ability of both teams. I mean, I don't think we've had in this country two teams which are just so committed to attack from the back, whether it's the fullbacks, whether it's the centre half stepping out. I mean, it is a celebration of all that's good about football. So the sort of Guardiola-Mane thing was a slight sort of, it jarred slightly in the week, whereas in the Ferguson-Wenger era, coming back to the respective ferocity of the rivalries, it was pretty much toxic, all the build-up.
It's probably going to be 0-0 now.
Yeah. But don't you think? I think you're right in terms of the managers, and it's not the personalities. They don't dislike each other as much, obviously. And even Klopp was trying to row back on his coming back at Guardiola over Mane, wasn't he? But in the boardrooms, we've got a Spygate investigation from the Football Association. Corporately, obviously, there's a sense, I think, at City that the financial fair play investigations. Obviously, they're driven by UEFA, but there's a sense that Liverpool are really enjoying that. And I get the sense that in the ownership, the rivalry is really real and deep, and it's a slightly different. It's different to that era. Maybe it's not concentrated on the personalities we see in front of the cameras, but I feel the rivalry is pretty deep.
Is that what football's become about now? It's just rivalry between directors. I much prefer sort of, when you had sort of Gary Neville sort of standing up to the cop, and you had all that sort of intensity on the field.
Well, yeah, agreed. That's more authentic. That's more what we grew up with knowing football. But I just don't think that it's. I'm not sure I think there's massive levels of respect between the manager. I imagine the players would respect each other. I'm just not sure that at boardroom level there'll be lots of love and hugging and kissing in the boardroom today.
Well, you make that point because Simon Mullock, in his piece that tracks and traces the history of the rivalries, and he just reminds us that John W. Henry, back in 2010, talking about UEFA and financial fair play rules, that he tweeted when City landed a £400 million sponsorship jackpot from Etihad Airways. Henry tweeted, not this Henry, John W. Henry, but how much was the losing bid?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. And Liverpool have a couple of times sort of poked that little hornet's nest, haven't they, and made comments about financial fair play. So, it's different. That is where football's moved on to. I might prefer pizza being flung around, but in a sense, this is more corporate. But
Liverpool have been very good about romanticising the quality of their team, the atmosphere at Anfield, the history at Anfield, the pedigree. This means more. All those kind of marketing slogans which they've used. I feel that Liverpool have found a way to romanticise what that club is about under Jurgen Klopp.
Oh, massively. I think there's a sense among Liverpool's fans. I know there's a genuine loathing between the fans. I think these things rise and fall, but their club is somehow a little bit more authentic for some reason, because of whether it's because of the history of the club, the traditions, the way that Jurgen Klopp has kind of harnessed like you say, the romanticism of Anfield, and I guess implicit in that is the characterisation of City as somehow less authentic because they had the billionaire sort of buying their club and that somehow their success is not quite as organic, and obviously that's going to rankle. And I think that's a big element of where the hatred has come from. I think this idea that there's an authentic club and a non-authentic club, and that's part of the beef, I think.
But so where that argument falls down is to actually ignore that City have been a very established club in this country.
Of course,
Manchester City are not a new club. I mean, I'm of an age that can remember, so one of my favourite players growing up was Colin Bell. I mean, that Manchester City team of the early 70s or mid 70s was just a fantastic team. So to sort of categorise, I know you're not doing this, but I mean, just to sort of slightly this categorisation of Manchester City as being a new club, when actually you walk into the ground and you talk to the fans and you talk to particularly the away following, who tend to be the sort of heartbeats of a club. They've seen some poor football in recent times. They've been going to sort of Macclesfield and all these, with respect to Macclesfield, all these clubs. But then they can also remember, when they were a great club as well. So I don't begrudge Manchester City fans.
I guess the difference, Henry, might be just because City moved stadium. We would be thinking about if we were romanticising it and thinking about nostalgia, the nostalgia would be walking up to Main Road, wouldn't it? The Kipax stand,
sure,
all those kind of memories. Liverpool have still got that. They've embraced that.
Sure, but do you remember what the east side of Manchester was like before Manchester City moved in there and provided jobs, schools? I mean, they have transformed an area. So this perception of them as being the root of all evil in football is a little bit harsh.
That's why it rankles so much among City fans.
Yeah,
because they have a history, they have a culture, they have a tradition as well, but it's kind of not recognised as such.
No, sure. OK. Let's get on to the action on the field, because that's what we're here for. That's what everyone at Anfield will be there for this afternoon. If we were to look at the strengths and the weaknesses, let's start with the front three of both teams. Who's got the stronger attacking intent?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's hard to bet against Liverpool, but I mean,
we
it's
accept
so
that they're
marginally,
But if they're not world class, they're up there.
I mean, I think also the way Bernardo Silva's been playing in the last 12 months, I'd find it really hard to split those two. In world football, there aren't many teams that compete with that. I guess it's about who competes on a day and who most effectively can use. It's interesting that Liverpool counter-attack even more against City than they do against other sides. Well, that's when they've been at their most effective. And so to me, it's not so much who's got the better side because they are so well matched. It's like who has the better strategy to get the best out of those players. And Klopp, sort of a year ago, would seem to be doing that, and then Pep seems to have reacted. And Guardiola's, we're talking in the week, Guardiola, only 3 times has Guardiola had less possession than the other side in his career, and all 3 times against Klopp teams. And he's won all 3 of those games, one of them on penalties, albeit. But that's where I think the balance is. The front 3, my goodness, I can't split them. I'll leave that to.
I mean, you've got Raheem Sterling is flying at the moment. I mean, we've seen this with country as well as club. But then you look at Mane. Mane's been fantastic. The way that Firmino plays, I mean, he still scores goals and he's creating. He's dropping back into midfield. He's linking. And then Mo Salah. I think we probably haven't actually seen the best of him this season, given the quality that he's got and we've seen in previous seasons. You get the impression from the Liverpool players that 1 point last season is really driving them on, and they really want to do it this season. There's that confidence and the belief as European champions. They know. I think if you look for, I mean, their defence hasn't necessarily been at its best, but they've still got they've got 2 fantastic fullbacks who almost play like wingers at times. Liverpool. They got Virgil van Dijk, it's fantastic. But then you look at maybe there 1 or 2 gaps in Manchester City's defence without Laporte. I mean, fair play to Guardiola. People talk about the riches he's got, but he is juggling with a few sort of injuries and loss of form as well. I think Robbie Fowler in one of the papers, I think is it Mirror Term, I got it wrong. He wrote an interesting column on it. He always thinks it comes back to midfield. you know, when you're trying to sort of prize apart two great sides. And you would think that Manchester City, but I mean, obviously Fernandinho's having to play deeper at the moment, but I think Manchester City, when all their midfielders are fit and flying and De Bruyne's there and bossing things, you would think Manchester City would have the edge. But then you look at the willpower of an individual like Jordan Henderson, who's the heartbeat of that Liverpool team, and the way that he is playing, the way he's absolutely determined to win this title. For the first time since 1990 for Liverpool. So emotionally, you think that there is this mindset in that Liverpool heartbeat, but technically you have to look at Manchester City's. Otherwise, I agree with you. I mean, the strike force, you can't really split. The obvious gap, of course, is going to be in goal as well if Bravo plays compared to Alisson.
Pep has ruled out Ederson, hasn't he? So he's not expected to play. We think Claudio Bravo will play for Manchester City. I'm a big believer in these games, Jonathan. I'd like to see the two best 11s on the field and say, OK, winner takes all here. And then that way there is no excuse. In the same way that I also think about the scheduling of the fixtures is on Wednesday night, Manchester City were in Milan to play Atalanta in the Champions League. Tuesday, Liverpool were at home to Genk in the Champions League. I just feel they've had the extra time, extra preparation.
Yeah, I mean, these things can work both ways. I think Liverpool they've had an extra day's rest. They were able to rest Firmino, they were able to rest Andy Robertson, whereas City played quite an exhausting game with 10 men for part of it. But I think that can somehow work. It can also work the other way around. I think a lot of the time Guardiola's City play best when they actually don't have a huge amount of time, when the games come thick and fast, when they can play without thinking, when the muscle memory takes over. You saw that in the second half of last season when they were competing in 4 competitions and it was like a relentless machine. It's almost like when they have too much time to think about a game, they can sort of build it up in their heads a little bit, and sometimes the occasion can get to them. You see that in European knockout games particularly. So I think it could actually work to their advantage. If City just turn up, they've had very little time to prepare for the game, they just sort of turn up and play, that might actually be the best strategy for them.
And Claudio Bravo, can he be trusted in a game with this significance in the title race?
I was up in Manchester on Friday and Pep was obviously vehemently defending him, which is exactly what you'd want your manager to do. But it almost felt like he was protesting too much, in that, well, if you really trust him, you wouldn't have to make this big case to us in the media. I mean, I totally get what he's saying. And Claudio Bravo is a fantastic goalkeeper of Barcelona and he's won trophies with Chile. So, who are you in England to sort of in our little England world to say, well, who is... But we know that first season, look, Guardiola made a decision after the first season that he wasn't good enough. However he tries to dress that up, he knew that was part of the problem. I know the rest of the team, they made some other additions, and the rest of the team on Friday was trying to say, well, Bravo, it wasn't just him because we weren't at the level of the team, and they made all the signings, the fullbacks and everything that summer, didn't they? Walker, Mendy, etc., and it improved in all sorts of areas. But fundamentally, that was a big weakness, and Bravo never settled in English football. And yeah, I mean, it's not just the shot stopping and the fact that he will be nervous passing out. It's Ederson's clip ball over the top, which I think is a really key part of how City play. And I think that although Pep talks about, obviously, they always try and play out the map, the fact that they have that ball, every 4, Ederson will just clip it over the top, gives the defence a break. And it's a clip pass and it's a brilliant strategy. I don't think Bravo can do that in the way that Ederson can, and I think that's a big miss.
It takes a particular quality to be a Pep goalkeeper, as Rob said, the distribution, but also the concentration. I mean, when Manchester City played your team, Crystal Palace, I think for 70 minutes...
It's like I'm a mascot.
You'd love to be a mascot there,
I've been the mascot. I've got the pictures.
But you look at Ederson's performance there, for 70 minutes, City had the ball and it was all being played sort of well away from him, and then suddenly he has to make that fantastic save. It was a Benteke header, and then that Zaha shot. Yep. 2 key moments, and he was absolutely ready for it then. So you've got to have that belief, you've got to have that confidence to be a Pep goalkeeper, as well as, quite rightly, the sort of distribution element, and that is why Ederson is way ahead of Bravo.
Yeah. If Liverpool win this afternoon, does it become theirs to lose, John?
Oh yeah, I mean, just the mathematics would dictate that. I think they've lost something like 1 of their last 50 games, and if they go 9 points clear, they would essentially have to lose 2 or 3 times. I don't think it's pivotal. I don't think this is, it's kind of weird to be talking about title deciders 11 games into the season, but where Liverpool kind of lost the title last season was not in, it wasn't in the City game in January. It was when they drew against United and when they drew against Everton. So whether, if they win, I don't think it's kind of right to call the title race, in November.
Yeah, but they would have a huge points advantage and also psychological. The mentality, they would have the mentality.
If I was City, as long as I was within 8 points in January, I would still think this is going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't think, obviously they can't really afford to lose today, but if they draw, they've just got to keep Liverpool within range, because that's a psychological barrier for Liverpool. Because suddenly you'll find in February, with the way the fixtures happen, Liverpool will have a postponed game or something, or they'll draw a game, suddenly 8 will become 4 very suddenly. And that's when the title race is on. Yeah, exactly. That's when the title race is on. That's when, obviously, Liverpool have done fantastically well, but that's when we're going to really discover what this Liverpool side made. They're fantastic and getting over 90 points. I'm not saying that they bottled it last year, but that's going to be really interesting. When that gap will shrink at some stage, and then do Liverpool kick on, or does it become 2 points? And then it's really interesting. So if I was City, I would just say, stay within, you just got to stay within 8 points over the next couple of months.
That was Fergie's mentality, wasn't it? The turn for home. Yeah. January the 1st, make sure you're within striking distance of the team at the top.
And it's not simply about the dynamic between those top two. Mm-hmm. There's also Leicester City, could easily take points. Chelsea, the way they're playing under Lampard, they could easily take points as well. So it's not as if each team is going to have a sort of smooth run to the line. No, sure. OK, game to look forward to this afternoon. Of course, Liverpool playing Manchester City at Anfield. Rob was at the King Power last night. He watched Leicester. They beat Arsenal 2-0. More on that game. It's coming next. Welcome back. Rob was at the King Power last night. Vardy's got Leicester City dreaming. This is match report from the game last night. Was it a close call for you? Did you have a decision to make here, Rob, on where the story was? It was a big win for Leicester City. Brendan Rodgers and this team. Jamie Vardy's 10th Premier League goal, but we've got Unai Emery as well.
Yeah, agreed. In terms of whether it should have been on Emery
or because I know there was obviously a decision to make here.
I like to go with the winners. In terms of, I think it's slightly disrespectful to Leicester to make that all about Emery possibly being on the brink, because I think Leicester is one of the stories of the season. I think they're going to be, if not directly in the title race, they're going to be in the top 3. And so, no, I feel that if a side... So if you get a big upset, saying when I was at Norwich when they beat Man City, mm-hmm. I like to go... Norwich were amazing today, rather than City. Obviously, you then have to deal with the City. City have got a bit of a crisis, etc. So that's always my inclination. And hopefully, we dealt with Emery in a separate story, because he was very much sort of fighting his corner last night, saying, "Well, I can sort this out in time." But you look at it, and there's absolutely no evidence it's going to get sorted out in time. It's kind of flatlined for a while. They haven't really improved since Arsene Wenger left, and they don't really look like they're going to improve. If I say this, they'll sack him tomorrow, but you get the sense that they're not going to sack him this week, that they'll just let it run on whilst he's in the top 6. You could argue they're not in touch with the top 4, but they obviously still do have a chance to make the top 4. It's very early days to call that one, so I don't think he's on the verge of going now, but I can't see how he's there next season. I can't see how. We're 18 months in. I don't think anyone really sees the vision for Unai Emery at Arsenal, where we're going, what's improved, what's happening. I think at the beginning they were slightly better coached defensively, looked slightly more organised, but you don't get that sense anymore. Playing a back 5 against Leicester, soaking up possession, playing on the counter. It's a strategy, but it's not a strategy you'd associate with the Arsenal that mm-hmm. we remember growing up, or really from 5-6 years ago, before the Wenger decline set in. So I can't. I think they have to start looking at a new manager for next season. Whether they make that change mid-season, that's an interesting call.
It was interesting watching I was only watching on television. I was watching Vardy, who is a very quick reader of opponents' flaws, even without him sort of doing all the sort of the research and the analysis. And Brendan Rodgers and Kolo Toure would have sort of prepared him for that. But he realised the gap between Bellerin and Chambers, on the right side of Arsenal's defence, and he decided, I'm going to work that inside left channel, and he had a few runs down there.
This is the old Ronaldo. This is the sort of Cristiano Ronaldo method, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bullying. He works out where he believes the weakness is and just says, okay, I'm going to pummel this. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, it was very, very effective. I mean, it's interesting that the point you make about from the journalistic perspective, how you do the intro. I thought it was a classic case of you doing contrasts. You look at the weaknesses in. I mean, I thought your piece was brilliant because it did reflect this. Because the weaknesses in Arsenal's were also reflected in the strengths of Leicester's, i.e. the man management of Brendan Rodgers, the way he's worked with these players. The fact that Arsenal have spent money, but Brendan Rodgers hasn't actually spent that much, and he's revitalised the team. Obviously, he's not Claude Puel, he's not whispering Claude, he's got more sort of dynamic individual. And the players are all responding. I mean, look at James Maddison, you look at, I mean, across the back, Soyuncu is sort of stepped in there. Soyuncu was saying that, he didn't feel lost when he wasn't in the team because Brendan Rodgers, his man management, said, keep training hard, wait, be patient, you will have your chance. And look how he stepped up. Look at, the recruitment. Coming back to the contrast, the quality of recruitment of Leicester City, bringing Johnny Evans in, Perez, who they got recently, Tielemans was available for what, 40 million euros?
Signed in summer.
And you knew he was Premier League ready because he'd shown what he could do in at Leicester last season. I mean, players like Ndidi, he's 22 and he's bossing in midfield like that. Now, those are the type of players that Arsenal would get in early. I think he was at Genk, wasn't he? He came in from there for not a considerable sum. So the contrast between manager, between recruitment, between belief on the pitch, between direction, between leadership off the pitch. I mean, Leicester have got good people working behind the scenes there. And Arsenal just, again, partly because absentee landlord, coming back to our old friend Silent Stan Kroenke, there is a lack of direction there, which is a complete contrast to Leicester, who know exactly where they're going. They're upwardly mobile, and Arsenal are sliding.
Yeah, progressive side, Leicester City. Are they in a title race?
I don't think they are quite yet. I think they're pretty. I'd give them a better than 50% chance of making the top four. I think the way that Spurs, Arsenal, Manchester United are going, there's a real gap in that. There's a real vacuum in that top four, and Leicester are, I think, quite clearly the third best side in the Premier League on current form. I love the way I love the kind of the collective, the way they work for each other. I mean, it's interesting talking about hearing Rodgers talking about how he's got Jamie Vardy to play in more central areas. He's basically told him to stop pressing so much, and the way you can do that is if it's all 11 players are kind of following the same defensive pattern. The Leicester's press, which was so great when they won the title in 2016, kind of collapsed under Craig Shakespeare. It collapsed under Claude Puel, and that the ferocious Leicester press is back. That's what makes them such a kind of a fearsome collective unit.
How would you describe their football? I mean, I was having to think about this last night about what Leicester City actually are under Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
What their style is. Can you sum it up?
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of
What
knew
are they doing?
They had more possession than Arsenal. They outpassed Arsenal, which even in their title-winning season you wouldn't have foreseen them doing. And they're getting the ball forward quickly. If you think about it like the parts of a machine, you see somebody like Ricardo Pereira bombing forward through the centre because he knows that somebody's covering the space that he leaves behind. He knows that the players are going to make space for him. That he knows that the ball's going to be delivered into a certain area at a certain time. That's the connectivity that characterises great sides. Now, whether they can keep it up over the course of the season, I don't know. But they're a more interesting team now, I think, than they were 3 years ago, because they've got so many different ways to play. They can play on the counter-attack, they can play possession football, they can play up the flanks, and they can hit you, through the centre as well.
Yeah.
They need to keep Vardy fit. I think that is their only potential flaw, the understudy for him, because they've got pretty good strength and depth. They've got a good academy with good kids coming through there, but Vardy is absolutely key. It'll be interesting to see what happens next summer. If he's carrying on playing like this, he's top of the scoring charts, whether Southgate goes back to him. But one of the reasons why he's having this longevity, which I think he mentioned in his post-match interview last night, is that he's having international breaks free. and he can just recharge his batteries.
Do you think that actually that's critical and crucial?
I mean, we saw it. I mean, Paul Scholes was saying, after he retired after Euro 2004, I think partly because he was fed up with playing on the left or not playing at all. I think he then had that sort of Indian summer. But it'd be interesting. I mean, if England are struggling in the semi-final and you've got Jamie Vardy on the bench, I mean, that's a huge asset to bring on.
Jamie Vardy's argument is should be playing. That'll be Vardy's argument. That's why he's retired.
Yeah, but he's not going to get in ahead of Harry Kane.
He thinks
he
should.
I think he thinks he should.
But in a 4-3-3, and then you've got Marcus Rashford or Jadon Sancho and obviously Raheem Sterling out wide. Well, I mean, that's the joy of Jamie Vardy. He does have this belief, and I think it's that belief that England should tap into. Look, it's an argument for next summer, but it will be an argument that we have. If Jamie Vardy is carrying on playing like this, and Leicester, as they're likely to, finish in the Champions League positions, and he's had, and we're considering whether he should be our Footballer of the Year, then Gareth Southgate absolutely has to go back to him and say, listen, just give me this summer. It's at home. Most of the games are at Wembley. You're not sort of trekking all over Russia or whatever. Just do it for him. It'd be interesting. I mean, Jamie Vardy's a patriotic guy. He's got an ego. He's a winner. Anyway, that's a debate for next summer.
Course,
but it's reflective of his form now, and the fact I think he's actually an even more. I mean, your point about the press is right. I think he's an even more intelligent and effective footballer now.
He's a more rounded player, isn't he? Yeah, there's no question about it. But Vardy or Kane at the moment, is there even an argument?
Well, it has to be Kane because of what he's done over the last 3-4 seasons. But I mean, Jamie Vardy is one of the best strikers in Europe at the moment. Right? I mean, he's playing like this. That he would get into won't say any side in Europe, but pretty much any side in Europe. He's a phenomenal striker, and Rodgers is getting the best out of him. He's fantastic to watch. He was fantastic in yesterday. You feel like he's going. I think it's 8-6 now. You feel like every time he gets a chance, he's going to score.
I thought we'd see the Eagles celebration last night when he scored. I thought he might take that on after last week at Selhurst Park. I thought he might adopt it.
The correct answer, by the way, is Tammy Abraham. It's not Kane or Vardy.
Throw that in there.
Well, I mean, on current form, I think Vardy never quite. I don't want to open up this huge can of worms. I think there's a moral case against Vardy playing for England. But I don't want to go into all that again. But at international level, I don't think Vardy ever quite recreated the form that he showed for Leicester, because the sort of game that England play at tournament level is not suited to his strengths. There is no space in behind in international football. Certainly not for you.
But I think that's changed for Leicester because they're not playing that way anymore. However, I would agree with you that for England, Jamie Vardy has to be centre of everything psychologically and in terms of team plan. He has to be centre of everything. And he can't be that for England, and that would be. I think that's why he's not in the squad, and that's the issue. But I do think he can play. Where I think he's shown now that he can play. He doesn't need that ball over the top to run on to. But I do think he needs to be the centre of everything. With Harry Kane there, he can't be that. Therefore, it's difficult.
Yeah. Also, I think in tight spaces, I would probably take Abraham over.
Well, as we saw
over Kane or Vardy.
As we saw yesterday with his goal,
form as well,
with Abraham's goal yesterday, with Willian's pass, the diagonal pass for Abraham to get in behind the Palace defence to score. That was exactly.
Anyway, Harry Kane's not going to be dropped.
No, he isn't. He is the England captain. OK, we're going to talk about events at Stamford Bridge. Yesterday, Chelsea, another win for them. It's 6 in a row in the Premier League. They beat Palace 2-0. More next. Welcome back. A reminder of us who's with us this morning: Jonathan Liu, Rob Draper and Henry Winter. Let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning as well, leading up to the big game in Anfield this afternoon. Sunday Express: writers off at your peril. That's Pep Guardiola's message to Jurgen Klopp and his rampant Liverpool side. Today, we're out to get you. That's Raheem Sterling's message to his former club. And then the message from Liverpool, from Anfield: no fear. Virgil van Dijk talking this morning in the Sunday Mirror. He's in various papers. VAR, it's killing the game. We're going to get onto this in part 4, but that's the Mail on Sunday's campaign. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We've just been talking about these boys. It's Leicester City. They're a class apart. That's the Sunday Times this morning, reflecting on their victory over Arsenal last night at the King Power. Of course, Rob was there. It's hard to take. David McGoldrick's effort ruled out yesterday for Sheffield United, but they did get a point, a well-deserved point as well at Tottenham. Blunder the hammer, Roberto. Big mistake here Did West Ham make a mistake appointing Manuel Pellegrini? It looks like it at the moment. They lost 3-0 at Turf Moor, but this is where we're talking, or who we're talking about now. Lamp's champing at the bit, challenging his players this season to go on, to challenge, to show that they can challenge for a Premier League title. It may not be this season, we understand and we work. We appreciate that the team is in development, Rob. But you saw them in pre-season, didn't you? When you weren't quite sure that this club had a plan and that they had the players to be able to, certainly, even if they conceived that plan, whether they had the players and the pedigree to be able to carry it out.
So I saw that Borussia Mönchengladbach the week before the season started, and they looked really bright going forward. Mount was superb, and you thought, well, he might actually start. But Abraham was missing chances. And what struck me was that it seemed that Frank Lampard has absorbed all the ideas about modern football. We've got to press, we've got to be on the front foot, all of that. But that's only half the picture. They were terrible all over the place when they were countered by Mönchengladbach, and Jorginho was left to defend on his own and couldn't do that, and then you just thought, defensively they're going to be a mess. I mean, it's one thing, it's not a strategy just say, we can be on the front foot and press and play attacking football. You need more than that. Then he went to Man United, looked great for 20 minutes, and then did much the same. Just got caught on the counter, beat him 4-0, and I just thought, well, OK, Frank Lampard, of course, he brings all the charisma, he brings that kind of togetherness of the club. And they're going to be more exciting to watch. But really, have he and Jody Morris got a plan to really compete with the likes of Klopp and Guardiola? They went to Liverpool and Super Cup that week, and I thought that was just really made my eyes open. I thought it was a superb tactical performance where they matched Liverpool, one of the best sides in Europe, went toe-to-toe, unlucky to lose on penalties. And I thought, OK, maybe they have. And I think what we've seen, I still think there will be periods in this season where this is going to be difficult with such a young team and young coaches. But I think he's proven himself tactically that they have got more of a plan.
Youngest Chelsea team in Premier League history. I think it was at average age around 24. Is that young? Do we actually consider that to be young, inexperienced?
I would do. What we mean by comparison to other teams, I think for a top four team, you generally you'd have sort of a 32-year-old and a 30-year-old. You have a few players that lift the team average, don't you? I mean, undoubtedly in key positions, to have young players playing at number 10, at centre forward, Williams' experience on the wing, but then it's either Pulisic or Hudson-Odoi. In very key areas, they've got very young players at centre half. They've got young players. That's the difference. Normally, your young players might be your wingers, maybe your full-backs, but your centre halves, your central midfielders, obviously Kante and Jorginho are stalwarts that hold them together. But I think it's young. I think
23 is very young. Yeah. I mean, particularly when you think that if you're winning the major trophies, and certainly internationally, people look at teams in the 26, 27, 28 age bracket. But the key for Lampard is, looking at it from the outside, is his brilliant man management. You get an individual like Jorginho, who was almost the sort of, the poster boy for all the ills of Sarri ball, and the fans weren't having him. And now he and Kovacic have been fantastic in midfield. And Lampard has clearly sort of worked with them, shown his belief in them. Pulisic, you mentioned Pulisic. He came for a big fee, £50 million. He's still young. Again, poster boy coming back to of American football, of soccer as they call it over there. And was he going to settle in? There were not rumblings, but he worked hard in training. He impressed Lampard. And Lampard put him back in, has been completely rewarded. And Pulisic has scored some good goals in recent weeks, but I really enjoyed the header because it just showed a certain sort of physical courage. It's probably too strong a word to use in a sporting sense, but to actually, first intelligence to continue his run, and then when the ball was deflected to him, come and sort of direct that sort of header in and risk a clattering. So, and the defence, the man management is just been absolutely key to bond Zuma and Tomori like that, to work with them. And obviously, if you're a young player and you've grown up watching Lampard win Champions League, play for England, win all these trophies with Chelsea, you're obviously going to be impressed. But also, I think tactically, as Rob was alluding to, he's just got them playing there's a whole area of positivity. And there was a headline the other day as, are Chelsea at risk of being liked? And I think you cannot go to Stamford Bridge nowadays and not come away with the feeling of, I was at the Ajax game the other night. It's just, it is pure entertainment there. But there's an intelligence behind it as well. And Jody Morris is a really important figure there, because obviously he knows all the youngsters. And I think it's good. And I think that the most interesting challenge that Lampard might have this season is if the two-window transfer ban gets overturned and he is allowed to go and buy in January. And look, he may well strengthen in certain areas, and he has indicated he may. But actually, there's such momentum with these young kids being given a chance that it's... we're going to St George's Park, was it on Tuesday? It's going to be full of taxis from Chelsea.
Tactically, I actually don't think Lampard's doing a huge amount different to what Sarri was doing last season. The principles are actually quite well established.
They're quicker through the thirds than they were with Sarri.
Yeah, but
I thought sorry, John. There were some little things that I noticed. Yes, it's the substitutions. It's the hugs for Pulisic when he came off. It was the it's the embrace. It says, "You're my man. Thanks very much."
There's an expression to them now.
Mason Mount, yes, he's ruffling his hair when he came off the pitch. Billy Gilmore when he went on. There's a clear attachment and
there's
affinity.
Far more warmth now than there was on Sarri.
But that's
you can
more
see the
management than tactics, isn't it? That's what Lampard brings. But
I would argue that is a tactic.
Yeah, well,
You're my man.
That was always Ferguson's argument, wasn't it? This is a thing. It's not nothing. It's part of the whole tactical plan. Yeah.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, no, there seems to be a culture of self-expression there now. There was a bit during the Palace game where Reece James was basically trying to dribble the ball out of defence from his own goal line past Wilfried Zaha, and he loses the ball. And obviously that's the sort of decision making that's probably going to get them taken to the cleaners a few times this season. But it's fun, and it's what I think it's what fans want to see. It's the sort of expression that kind of creates a whole positive mood around the place. And if they can kind of sneak into the top four, if Lampard can sneak them into the top four, and they've developed all these young players, that's a really great platform.
He also played really well against Zaha.
Yeah, he did. He was really good.
Okay, so he risked it there, and I think Lampard quite likes that. I think, listen, young players, you're going to make a mistake, but actually, carry on expressing yourself.
The Ajax game was a warning, wasn't it? Because tactically, for all the good things I said about his tactics, sometimes you see, whoa, this can go horribly wrong at times, and young players, that's going to happen. But overall, it's just they look like the young Ajax side of last season. They're really excited to watch the stadiums all with them. If they went far in Europe, they'd have that vibe about this sort of. I know they're not underdogs like Ajax; their budget's much bigger, but because they're on a transfer ban, because they've had to bring the youngsters, it has that kind of energy about it.
What did it say about that decision to drop Azpilicueta yesterday? I felt it was coming in the Ajax game that when he put Reece James on at half time, and he moved Azpilicueta to the left.
He took Alonso off, didn't he?
Yeah, he took Alonso off. But it did feel like the Azpilicueta decision was coming.
It's been coming for a while, hasn't it? And Azpilicueta, probably one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League 2-3 years ago when under Conte and the captain. Just has gone through a few. It's more than a few months now, isn't it? Where he just hasn't been hitting those levels. So, but the willingness to promote someone who was playing for Wigan last season and put them straight into, that's been missing, not just at Chelsea, but at Premier League clubs all around the country for a long time. It's like, we can't really trust them. And it's just been fascinating to see Chelsea forced into that and going, actually, they're okay. Tammy Abraham's season reminds me of that first Harry Kane season when he took off under Pochettino. He only started playing regularly in about October, I think. But you were thinking, I'm not sure this was going to last, and is he quite good enough? And then, he is given a chance. He is good enough, and that's what it feels like with Abraham. It's like, actually, given a chance. I was sceptical, as I said, pre-season, going, is he probably they'll end up falling back on Giroud?
Well,
it's just a safe bet.
That Manchester United at Old Trafford, when he played Tammy Abraham in that game, and I was at position at Old Trafford, and I thought Giroud should be on that pitch.
And then he missed a pen, Abraham, in the Super Cup on Wednesday, didn't he? So that tells you a lot about the personality of the player, doesn't it? That he stood strong. And you find out a lot about young players very quickly, I think. It's not quite sink or swim, but often if you get about a 4 or 5 game window to prove yourself, and after a couple of games it looked like Tammy Abraham maybe he was failing, but he came back quick enough to retain that place, and you can build a career on those short spells as a young player. You know, you earn your place, you get it, you keep it, the confidence keeps you there. And from that, you've got a foundation for a great career.
Yeah. Well, how long can Lampard get away with bringing in all these young players, Henry? It's working for him at the moment, but is there a point when he has to say, OK, we've blooded enough here?
What, when he's got 11 in the team?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope he just carries on. I think it's fantastic. You go down to Cobham and you just see the amazing work they're doing over at the academy, but are enough of them, or have enough of them in the past, being used? Clearly not. And I think this is, you go to Stamford Bridge now, you listen to the fans, and they're absolutely loving it. The point about Tammy Abraham is that there's a support structure around him as well, because they are a band of brothers. You know, if he's having a poor game, he knows that he has got teammates that he's known for sort of 5-6 years who will look after him on and off the pitch. So that gives him an extra strength.
Yeah. What, in terms of their aspirations with the team they've got, and the way they're playing, 6 in a row in the Premier League, it has to be said, it's very impressive. But what are their aspirations this season? Have they been adjusted?
Yeah, I think there's a...
I think after the Old Trafford game, people say, oh, well, if we finish 10th this season,
well, yeah,
we'll be happy.
There's an acceptance, I think, that this is kind of a transitional year, that there are all these caveats in place, and Lampard, for the first time, for the first time, there's a Chelsea manager is not really expected to launch a title challenge. That it's fine to have a year where you finish third, you finish fourth, and you kind of build a platform to build on. So build a platform to yeah, that's tautology.
We know what you meant.
Yeah, you know what I meant. So if they can, I think how this season feels is actually going to be more important than how obviously they need results, but if they can keep the sort of the optimism and the exuberance of the early part of the season and end the season strongly, and then have a good summer. That's I think more important than whether they conceded 50 goals or 55 goals or 35 goals or whatever, or whether they made the League Cup final or whatever.
Yeah, Rob, for you?
Well, how you feel about your club is not the main thing. It's not the only thing, but it's a really important thing. And we alluded to Liverpool, they play out the history. How fans feel, and you knew Lampard was going to bring that, but you thought, is that temporary? Because if you're 10th after 12 games, then how long's Roman going to put up with that? But I think that's what they can get. If they can come fourth and they get through to the latter stages of the Champions League, that's been after a transfer ban. That's been excellent season.
They'll see it as a successful season. Yeah, good win for Frank Lampard and his Chelsea side yesterday. 6 in a row in the Premier League. They beat Palace yesterday. OK, next up, we're going to be talking about VAR. More controversy this time at Tottenham's coming next. OK, let's talk VAR now, Henry. The Mail on Sunday's campaign, Rob's paper, of course, Chris Wilder leading the protests yesterday, very, very upset. As I think many believe he was entitled to be, David McGoldrick's efforts ruled out after an interminable delay, Henry, nearly 4 minutes before this decision was finally made to chalk this goal off. Sheffield United eventually did go on to draw this game. It was 1-1, but the Mail on Sunday says it's killing the game. Is the technology killing the game?
3 minutes 47 seconds. 3 minutes 47 seconds where the players who are highly tuned athletes are standing around in the cold. 3 minutes 47 seconds where the fans are not knowing whether to celebrate, whether to commiserate, to just go off and go home early, to go off and get a drink or whatever. 3 minutes 47 seconds when people who are watching thinking, well, might as well put an ad break in here. Yeah. I think it's so embarrassing. I'm a supporter of technology. I think it's crazy that the individual in the stadium who needs recourse to technology, who's the one who's going to be making the decision, i.e. the referee, is the only one in the ground who, over the last sort of decade, hasn't had. In the press box we've got monitors. The fans have got sort of replays on their phones. So some form of technology is needed, and the technology is there. If the referees, and Mike Riley is the problem with this, the main guy at the PGMO, if he allows the referees to go over and consult the screens as they do in the Champions League, as they do in Europe, and it's we've got 2 or 3 of our referees are doing that in midweek in the Champions League, but they're not allowed to do it at the weekend. I mean, it's farcical. It's a pantomime season come early. Mike Riley's got to realise that the game doesn't belong to him. It doesn't belong to the PGMO. It doesn't belong to the referees who are sitting in Stockley Park, staring at screens and deciding what's happening in games, in these great great grounds across the country. The game belongs to players, it belongs to the supporters, and at the moment, Mike Riley and the PGMO and the VARs they're not killing the game, but they're killing the joy, the explosion of emotion that you get for the players. Does a player celebrate? Do fans celebrate? Do they get two celebrations? Clearly, I mean, it's ridiculous that we are arguing. I thought Chris Wilder was actually, when he talks about the game, he talks so much sense. And the game should be about Chris Wilder, not about Mike Riley. We should be listening to Chris Wilder, not Mike Riley. He should be shaping the future of the game, not Mike Riley. And Chris just spoke so intelligent, fairly measured. He said, really, has it all come down to the size of John Lundstrom's big toe? Broadening it out, has it come down to the size of someone's armpit? In terms of goals and offside and things like that. The PGMO and the Premier League need to talk to the players. They need to talk to the supporters, talk to the Football Supporters Association and say, is this destroying your love of the game? What can we do? So there is an element of technology, which I think is needed, but it's not just this big brother which is destroying the game at the moment.
Did you put this manifesto together, Rob, in your
No,
paper this
not
morning?
personally. But
the 1 to 4, I should read them out.
Yeah,
Number
I'm
1,
up for it,
4-point plan for a better VAR. Number 1, allow the referees to look at the pitch side monitors. 2, improve communication with the fans and be more transparent. 3, broadcast the discussion between VAR and the on-field referee, so we'll be able to hear it inside the stadiums and at home. Don't rule an offside decision unless it is a clear and obvious error, which would have meant the Lundstrom toe that Henry just mentioned. Sheffield United would have been onside. McGoldrick's goal would have stood.
That's one of the best things you've ever written, Rob. Honestly, I claim credit for it. I think
it was all mine. I wrote all of that.
4 points, snappy.
I have to disagree with my colleague Chris Foy's in the paper saying that. So this is a key point for me on the offside. It's either offside or it's not. On those tight decisions, that's not the case. It's not binary. I know in our minds it ought to be, like it should either be offside or not, but the frame rate means that you're not seeing a clear image. It depends which frame rate you selected as only 50 per second. Therefore, that image did not show him offside. If you'd taken the frame before, he could have been onside. The margin of error is considerable. It can be 38 centimetres, probably about 15 centimetres. So it's not showing that you're offside. So you're not seeing, it's pretending to be something it's not. Oh, well, now we know. Mm-hmm. Now, offside's always been an educated guess by the linesman, and we've kind of lived with that, even though it was, it was difficult to live with. This is also an educated guess with lines being drawn and camera, but you don't know for sure. So that's the thing that people say.
So we can't say for sure that Lundstrom, his toe was not.
Absolutely, because you took the frame before, which is the 50, the second before, he could have been onside.
Have you ever seen a slow motion, a really slow motion shot of a foot kicking a ball? The ball compresses slightly, right, and it then kind of rebounds. There's sort of there's an elastic to a football, and then it kind of rebounds off the foot, and so the foot is in contact with the ball for a period of time. It's not an instant. So where do you measure is the pass played when the ball first makes contact with the foot, or when the ball leaves the foot, or these are the kind of really stupid.
It's meant to be when it leaves.
And also, John, on that point, the fans really want to care about the compression of the ball. No, none of us want to have this conversation. It's so boring. But this is what happens. Because football was not mature enough for technology. What happened is that there was a time in the game where you said, well, maybe that player's offside, maybe that player's not offside. We can't really be sure, but that wasn't good enough for some people. People wanted absolute certainty. People craved absolute, and they wouldn't tolerate the fact that you might have a grey area, or a benefit of the doubt, or that we couldn't be sure about something. And because we've erased this grey area, people are so intolerant of margins for error, things like that.
But we're pretending to erase it, aren't we? We haven't actually erased it.
Exactly.
We're pretending. And then you draw these ridiculous lines. That's what really irks me. The lines going, oh, look, it proved it. You haven't proved anything. All you've done is drawn a line. That doesn't show anything. And cricket deals with, you watch a lot of cricket, umpires call. I don't understand why you can't have referees call. Yeah, it was marginal. Could go one or the other, referees call.
But the initial impetus of bringing in technology and VAR wasn't actually so much the offsides, because the Premier League standard of linesmanship, to use an old word, was actually pretty good. Was it sort of 94 to 95% correct on decisions, which actually you can deal with in a fast-flowing game. it was actually the initial impetus for bringing in VAR was more for mistaken identity, more for violent tackles and penalties and things like that. But it seems to have moved away, and it was supposed to promote attacking play, but actually, if anything, it's just inhibited the chances of people like McGoldrick getting his first Premier League goal.
Yeah, they did recover in the end, though, Sheffield United. They got a good result yesterday at Tottenham, 1-1 in the end. OK, next up, we're going to talk all things England. The women's team were in action against Germany last night at Wembley Stadium. And England, of course, got a game against Montenegro and in Kosovo next weekend. OK, welcome back. We're going to talk all things England now. England's women's team were in action last night at Wembley Stadium. 77,000 there. Rebecca Myers reporting in the Sunday Times this morning. England suffer on their big night, on a record night at Wembley Stadium, guys. They did lose that game, but of course, so much will be talked about the attendance. 77,000 there, an excellent atmosphere. I have to say, a different type of atmosphere, but a huge attendance to Wembley to watch the women's team play Germany. They did lose 2-1, but how significant is the number of people on a Premier League match day who decided to go and watch that game at the National Stadium last night?
So I think there's two strands to this. One is obviously it's hugely significant. A game that was banned by the FA until the early 1970s. Let's not forget that women's football was banned by the FA. That we've got to this point. So that's a big story. That's a big take-home point from this. That this is an extraordinary success story and fantastic. But actually, it's really good. We're also talking about 1 win in 7 and Phil Neville being under pressure, because again that represents we're not just saying, wow, it's amazing, there's a lot of people watching women's football. We're saying, oh, hold on a second, Phil, we need to see something better. And that shows a maturity in the debate about the game, that the England manager is under pressure because he hasn't performed after the World Cup. Personally, I'd say judge him on the Olympics, because now you have this curious thing, he's going to be Team GB manager for the Olympics, but that's clearly their next staging post for a lot of these England players. And that's the moment at which you'd say, OK, if they don't kick on at the Olympics, then that's the point to judge him. But I think it's really healthy that an England women's manager is seriously under pressure because they're not delivering after a World Cup.
The important thing of yesterday was that there would have been kids amongst the 77,000 who thought, I want a bit of this, and will go and badger their parents to take them to the local club, who will then actually be the Nikita Parises and Steph Houghtons of the future. So I think that was for me the big plus yesterday.
Yeah, and you caught some of it as well. I mean, OK, we were watching Leicester Arsenal last night, but you still managed to. You still caught up with it in between Leicester City goals. Yeah,
I mean, it was almost like watching the England's men team with the coach under pressure and missed penalties. They've as Rob said, the direct chef. Look, there are issues in that team in terms of some of the defending, in some of the the lack of possession, but they were up against a very good team. And long term, I mean, the direction of travel of the Lionesses is fantastic. There's some amazing role models in there, and the country is embracing them. And turning up 77,000 is a phenomenal turnout.
Yeah, it just struck me because it was a Premier League match day, and it was match going.
Filthy weather, and they turned up.
For years, for decades, the rap on women's football, for the people who played it, the people who championed it, will run up against a brick wall. If people get right, well. People don't care about women's football. Go away and come back when you've sold out Wembley Stadium. You know, that's why it'll never be as big as men's football, because women's football just won't sell tickets. And now a lot of these same people will be saying, oh, well, the tickets were, they're only £15 or whatever. People will still, put caveats and obstacles in them, because there are a lot of people out there who just kind of want women's football to fail. And this was a massive, massive rejoinder to those people. The steps that have been taken from, playing in front of a few hundred people 20 years ago, from buying their own kit, it's one of the great success stories of British sport.
Ash, very quickly, yes. It was only 20 years ago that I can remember an England press team turning up for a game at Wembley.
77,000 there?
There weren't, 77 maybe. And the FA kicked off because we had a female journalist in our ranks. And they said, well, she can't play, in a mixed team. And we were going, what? And they eventually relented, but it's taken.
There'll be a mixed team on November the 19th, Henry, right? Because you're dusting off your boots for this game.
You don't turn your country down, Ash, and unfortunately, I think you are can't
I
believe
think I'm
that,
out
Ash.
of the country. That will be the problem. I can't be in 2 places at once.
But you're the only one with any lungs in the team, Ash. We
I
need
don't know
you.
about that. You've got yourself.
Can't believe
Matt
it, Ash, letting
Dickinson.
us down. I'm very much on the bench.
Will there 77,000 yesterday? Will there be 77,000 or more for the men's team's game against Montenegro on Thursday night?
Oh, that's a good question. You could have given me a
Sorry.
bit of warning about that. I'd have rung the FA and found out how ticket sales are going. I mean,
Well, they
Would
have
you
been
expect-
pushing ticket sales,
Yeah.
so obviously they haven't sold out.
yeah. So I think, it probably won't. I mean, and as Jonathan's critics will point out, that all world of ticket prices are different, etc., etc. So it's difficult compared directly, but it's all generally a sign of the progress. I mean, I thought the Women's World Cup was a real landmark moment where you had the whole country. So watching, you've got girls up and down the country completely engrossed and enthralled and wanting to be those Lionesses. I thought that was a massive turning point, and they've been needing to build on that performance-wise, but this was important for building on it in terms of motion-wise, a landmark of, OK, here's something we can look to show that we've built on that World Cup legacy.
Yeah. It's the 1,000th game as well, isn't it? Or it's the build-up to the 1,000th game this week, Henry. Sorry to put you guys on the spot, because I just thought about this, but do you have a particular game that stands out?
Probably at most of them, won't
I've spent the last week going through the previous 999. I'm ashamed to say I was only at a third of them. And just looking at them, and I mean, it is extraordinary. So 5-1 even Heskey scored. I think that would be, I think you go back. Are you talking about games that we've been to?
I always think these things, it's a game that you were at.
The first game, well, I've had to write a piece on the first game I went to, which was Hampden Park, Lineker's debut in '84, when Tony Woodcock scored. And I remember the programme, Gordon Strachan on the front cover of the programme, Mark McGee sort of starting the scoring. And it was, just the excitement, the intensity, the patriotism of all that. Games in recent years, I really enjoyed covering England in their run to the semi-final, because I just thought there was players express themselves off the pitch, on the pitch. Gareth Southgate, you always look for a little bit of symmetry. He's addressed England's penalty problems when he was part of the problem in the past. I think there's a confidence going into next summer as well, with an incredibly likeable bunch of young players who I think embody so much of what should be good in society as well as in sport. So I think next summer's exciting. But then, as ever, you look at the French, you look at the Dutch, you look at the Belgian team. The Belgians, they can put a second 11 out there, and they give most people a test. So look, challenges to come, but it'll be a celebration. I think it's on Thursday night. The FA, as ever, do these things well. The former captains coming. It'll be quite an emotional night. The most important thing, though, is that they get the point to qualify.
Yeah, absolutely. Memorable game, standout game for you, Rob, covering England.
England 4, Holland 1. Euro 96.
Inside the stadium.
I was a punter, so got a late ticket, restricted view. But that, as we all know, almost better than covering. We have a great privilege to meet with the players and manager afterwards. But being swept up in sheer joy of an England performance, I never thought.
Can I say it was great fun covering that game? It was absolutely brilliant. Early goals, brilliant goals. The combinations between Sheringham and Shearer.
Sheringham combination for a goal where he lays it off.
And then the England fans celebrating the Dutch goal at the end because it knocked Scotland out. I mean, there were so many elements to that.
I fear what the answer will be here, John, but I will have to ask you for your most memorable England game too.
That's probably the first. I mean, this is not one I was at, but the first one I really remember affecting me was the 2-0 defeat to Holland in '93. That I think was the first time I discovered that football could break your heart. And I cried and I cried and I cried, and my mum was like, "All right, it's only football. It's only football." I was like, "I'll show you. I'm going to go talk about football on the telly one day." That was. And I remember just feeling this utter hatred for these Dutch players who I couldn't pronounce, and I got sidetracked slightly.
That's good.
Stream of consciousness.
I knew it wouldn't be straightforward when I asked for your most memorable game. You've chosen a different.
So your career is based on Ronald Koeman, an enmity for all to Ronald Koeman.
Basically,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. We'll have to.
Do you ever wear orange?
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. You can continue this conversation on the way up to Anfield, because you're both going there for Liverpool against Manchester City. Thanks very much to John for his company this morning, to Rob and to Henry too.